If you enjoy horror stories, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more. New horrors drop every day. Some you'll remember, and some you won't. Let me know in the comments, where are you watching from, and what time is it for you right now? Now let's begin. The first time they heard it, the sound came crawling through the trees like a broken prayer. Long after midnight, when the fire had burned down to a sullen ring of coals, it came, something between a scream and a growl, cracking the silence like bones snapping under pressure. "Did you hear that?" Jamie whispered, pulling her sleeping bag tighter around her shoulders. Her breath came out in puffs, and her eyes reflected the red glow of dying embers. Cameron froze, cocked his head. "Probably a fox," he muttered, but his voice didn't carry any weight. "Or a coyote." "No," said Danny, sitting up now, eyes wide and staring into the black forest that yawned around their campsite. "That wasn't a fox." No one spoke after that. The woods loomed too big, too dark, pressing in on all sides. Wind moved through the trees in a way that felt wrong, too deliberate, like something inhaling just beyond sight. They were deep in the Four Corners wilderness, somewhere along an unmarked trail off Devil's Backbone Ridge. Locals had warned them not to go this way, told them the land was cursed, that there were stories. But they were college students, cynical, drunk on skepticism and beer, hungry for a thrill. Now, the thrill had turned sour. A twig cracked. It was close. 10 feet away, maybe less. Danny reached for the flashlight beside her and clicked it on, the beam trembling as she aimed it toward the noise. Nothing. Just gnarled tree trunks, roots coiled like sleeping serpents, and shadows thick enough to choke. Then, something moved. Just a flicker, the barest suggestion of shape at the edge of the light. Low to the ground, long-limbed, and wrong. The light jittered. Danny sucked in a breath, but before she could scream, it was gone again. "Pack your shit," Cameron whispered hoarsely. Now. They didn't argue. Tents were abandoned. Backpacks half-sipped. They grabbed what they could and started down the trail, boots crunching through underbrush, flashlights dancing like frantic ghosts. But the thing followed. They never heard it walk, only felt it watching, an invisible noose tightening with every step. And then Jamie screamed. Not a scared yelp. Not startled. A full-throated, blood-freezing scream of pure, animal terror. They spun. The light caught her for a moment. Her face twisted in pain and disbelief. Something had her by the ankle, thin, emaciated fingers dragging her back into the trees. Something pale, hairless, with hollow sockets where its eyes should be. "Jamie!" Danny shrieked, lunging, but Cameron yanked her back. "It's too late." The last they saw was Jamie's nails raking furrows into the dirt before the darkness swallowed her whole. Then silence. Deafening. Endless. They ran. Not back to the car. Not to safety. They ran blind, into the forest, deeper into its mouth, as behind them the thing began to laugh. It was a sound that didn't belong in this world. Crooked and wet, like someone gargling gravel and bile. A voice made of rot, threading itself between the branches, bouncing off the rocks, as if the forest itself were mocking them. Danny's lungs burned. Her legs screamed. Roots snagged her boots, branches slashed at her face, but she didn't stop. Couldn't. Behind her, she could still hear Cameron crashing through the undergrowth. He was cursing between breaths, calling her name, but she didn't slow for him either. The thing was behind them, and it had Jamie's voice now. Somewhere to the left, just beyond the trees, came a high, warbling cry. "Cameron, help me. It hurts. Cameron, please." Danny froze mid-stride. That was Jamie's voice. But it wasn't right. Too thin, like it was being stretched, pulled through something that didn't know how to speak properly. The cadence was off. Too slow. Too soft. Each word placed like a child assembling a puzzle they didn't understand. Cameron skidded to a stop beside her. His face was pale, his eyes wide and wet. "Danny," he breathed. "That's her. That's Jamie. We have to go back. We left her." "That's not her," Danny hissed. "How do you know?" But Danny couldn't answer. She didn't know how she knew, only that every instinct in her gut was screaming to keep running. Cameron didn't wait. He turned and stumbled toward the voice. "Cameron, no." Too late. He was already moving toward the call. The voice came again. But this time it was closer, much closer. "It's me, it's me. I'm cold. Please, help." Then something stepped out of the trees. And Danny's heart dropped into her stomach. It looked like Jamie. At first. Same hoodie. Same blonde braid. Same pleading eyes. But her head hung too low, neck bent at a grotesque angle. Her arms were too long, stretched past her knees, and her feet were bare, blackened and twisted, toes curling like roots into the dirt. Cameron slowed. "Jamie." The thing cocked its head and smiled. The mouth split too wide. Lips tearing. Teeth small and sharp like a predator's. And then, as Danny watched in horror, it began to mimic crying. Strange, wheezing sobs, too rhythmic, too clean. Like it was practicing grief. "Come here," it gurgled. Cameron took one step forward. Then the thing dropped the act. With a sound like wet fabric tearing, its arms lashed out. Cameron didn't even scream, just disappeared into a flurry of claws and snapping bone. Danny turned and ran. Again. Blinded by tears, by panic, by the sheer wrongness of what she'd just seen. She didn't stop until the trees thinned, and a dark outline of a ranger station appeared through the mist, slumped beneath the weight of the mountain like a forgotten relic. It looked empty, but she had nowhere else to go. The front door creaked open with a low moan, the kind of sound that felt deliberate, like it was reacting to her presence rather than time or wind. Danny stumbled inside, slamming it shut behind her and throwing the bolt across with trembling fingers. She backed away from the door slowly, heart hammering against her ribs like it wanted out of her chest. The inside of the ranger station was cold, dusty, and dark. Old papers were scattered across the desk. A mounted radio sat silent, its casing smeared with something reddish-brown. There was a map pinned to the far wall, faded, torn in the center, showing a crude outline of the forest, the trail spiderwebbing outward into nowhere. She stumbled to the desk and grabbed the radio mic. "Hello? Anyone? Please, someone come in." Static. She pressed the button again, harder this time. "There's something out there. I need help. I'm at the station just north of Devil's Backbone, please." Only more static. She sank into the old wooden chair behind her, hands shaking so hard she dropped the mic. The sound it made hitting the floor felt far too loud in the empty building. Somewhere far off, outside, something moved, twigs snapping, leaves rustling in a way that suggested purpose. Danny's breath caught. And then, creak. The front porch. Something was on it. Her eyes went to the door, to the thin gap beneath it. She saw feet, bare, blackened, twisted, just standing there, unmoving. A knock came, soft, as if it didn't want to break the wood, only the sound. Then, a voice. "Danny, let me in, it's me. I'm okay now. I got away." It was Cameron's voice. Exactly Cameron's voice. But she'd seen him. Seen the blood, the claws, the thing that wore Jamie's face tear him apart. And now he was standing at the door. "I'm hurt," the voice said. "Please. I need you." Danny didn't answer. She didn't move. The silence stretched. Then the voice changed. Lower now. Hungrier. "You shouldn't have run." The feet shifted. Another knock, harder. The door shuddered in its frame. And then, like something out of a nightmare, she heard a long dragging sound on the wood, like claws running slowly down the door, followed by that same distorted laughter that had chased them through the trees. She couldn't take it anymore. Danny bolted, diving through a side door into what looked like a supply closet. She shut it quietly behind her and crouched in the dark. Old boots, ropes, and a rusted first aid kit cluttered the floor. She held her breath, listening. Footsteps creaked across the floorboards now. Slow. Measured. Something sniffed the air. Then, closer. A whisper, right outside the closet door, "Found you." Danny clamped a hand over her mouth, biting down on her knuckle to keep from screaming. Her body shook with such force she could feel her molars grinding. The thing was right there, just inches of cheap plywood between her and it. Another long, deliberate inhale. She imagined it leaning close, pressing its face to the crack between the door and the frame, that grotesque parody of a smile spreading across stolen lips. She reached blindly with her free hand, fingers searching through the clutter until they brushed cold metal. A flare gun. Old, but still loaded. She gripped it tight. A pause. Then the knob jiggled, not hard, but casually, as if it were curious. "I'll wear you next," it whispered. "You'll fit better than the last one." The door rattled harder now, and Danny could hear it beginning to splinter at the edges. No more time. She kicked the door open with everything she had. The wood cracked off its hinges and slammed into the thing outside. Not Cameron anymore, not even close. It had shed the illusion. Pale skin stretched thin over a raw-bone frame, its face a warped canvas of features it had tried and failed to arrange like a human's. One of Jamie's eyes. Cameron's lips, but stitched too tight. Its joints bent backward. Fingers too long. A patchwork of what it had consumed. It hissed and reeled back. Danny raised the flare gun and fired. The flare ignited with a shriek of heat and light, slamming into the creature's chest. It exploded in a burst of red and orange fire, the light so intense it painted the walls in hellish shades. The thing screamed, a horrible, layered sound, like multiple voices shrieking at once, all forced through one raw throat. It stumbled back, flailing, crashing into the desk, knocking over the radio. Danny didn't wait. She ran again, out the back of the station and into the night, smoke clinging to her skin. The forest opened before her like a mouth full of teeth. The air had gone colder. The stars above seemed distant, as if she were sinking away from them, deeper into some place the world had forgotten. Somewhere far behind, the creature was still shrieking, or something else was. It didn't matter. The thing hadn't died. She could feel it. It would follow. They always did. She didn't know where she was running now. No map, no trail. Her flashlight was gone. Her breath came in ragged bursts. And still she heard it. In the woods. Ahead. Behind. All around. Not footsteps now. Voices. So many voices. All calling her name. Danny, Danny, Donnie. They echoed through the trees like wind whistling through hollow skulls, some high and childish, others guttural and cracked with age. They came from every direction, weaving through the dark like a net tightening around her. Every time she looked back, she expected to see it, that lanky, too long body, shambling with impossible speed. But the forest stayed empty. That was worse. She tripped over a rock and slammed hard onto the ground, her hands skidding through damp leaves and mud. Pain lanced up her wrists, but she scrambled up again, breath wheezing in her throat. There was a light ahead. Flickering. Moving. Danny ducked low and crept toward it, heart hammering. A campfire. Real. Not like the one they left behind with Jamie's scream echoing through the trees. This one was smaller, burning low, surrounded by a ring of flat stones. A woman sat beside it, wrapped in a faded red blanket, her long black hair braided down her back. She looked up when Danny stepped into the clearing. "You ran into it," the woman said, not surprised. Not alarmed. Just certain. Danny didn't speak at first. Her mouth opened, but nothing came. Finally, she rasped, "What the fuck is that thing?" The woman poked at the fire with a stick. Sparks jumped. "It has no name worth repeating," she said. "But it wears many. Skinwalker. Yenald Lucii. Once human. Now not. It hunts what it envies. Learns your voice. Your face. Wears it until it rots off." Danny swallowed hard. "It killed my friends." The woman nodded slowly. "That's what it does." "You have to help me," Danny said, stepping forward. "Please. I can't outrun it. I can't fight it. I can't stop it," the woman said. "But I can tell you what might." She reached into a leather pouch at her side and drew out a small, bone-colored figure, crudely carved, humanoid, its face blank. "Make it see itself," she said, pressing the figure into Danny's palm. "They hate their reflection. Hate what they are. They forget. They want to forget. If you show it what it's become, truly show it, it will unravel." Danny looked down at the strange totem. It was warm. "How?" she asked. But when she looked up, the woman was gone. The fire was out. The forest was silent. No footsteps. No wind. No breathing. Only Danny, the figure in her hand, and the suffocating dark curling inward like a fist. And then, a whisper in her ear, hot and close and trembling with hunger, "Found you again." Danny spun, fists raised, hard a jackhammer behind her ribs. Nothing. No one. Just the endless trees, gnarled and leaning inward like ancient watchers. Her breath fogged in the cold air. She could still feel it, though. Something had whispered that in her ear. She felt the exhale on her neck, smelled the rot, heard the faint wick click of its throat. She clutched the bone figure tighter. It pulsed once, warm, like a living heartbeat. From somewhere far off, she heard a soft, distant cry. A voice that didn't belong to her world anymore. "Danny, help me," it was Jamie again. Or what was left of her. The sound clotted Danny's insides, dragging guilt and thorough up from the depths like bile. She squeezed her eyes shut. Don't listen. It's not her. It's not her. She opened her eyes to find the forest had changed. There was no trail now. The trees leaned closer, bark slick with something that looked like oil. Moss hung in tatters like skin peeling from a corpse. The ground was soft and wet beneath her boots, each step squelching as though the forest itself were swallowing her whole. But ahead, faint and flickering, light again. Not firelight. Lanterns. A trail of them, stretching forward into the dark like breadcrumbs leading deeper into a mouth. Each glowed with a sickly yellow hue, hanging from branches at regular intervals. They swayed gently, though there was no wind. She didn't want to follow them. But she did. What else could she do? As she moved between the hanging lanterns, the forest began to whisper. Not voices this time. Not words. Just impressions. Emotions. Images she didn't want. Flesh peeling. Bones snapping. Eyes, always eyes, empty sockets staring from beneath faces that weren't supposed to be worn. Then the trail ended. At a clearing that seemed too large to belong in any real forest. A ring of stones marked its border, and at the center, half lit by the lanterns, stood a mirror. Old. Cracked. Its frame was twisted wood, bound in sinew. The glass was warped and fogged, but not broken. And in front of it, him. The skinwalker. It wasn't wearing anyone's face, no. It didn't need to. Its true form was worse. Tall, spindly, all elbows and knees. Skin like stretched parchment, veins pulsing underneath. Its head was bald and bulbous, the face an abstract smear of human parts melted together. One eye blinked. A jaw opened sideways. A tongue lolled out, twitching. It saw her. And it smiled. "You're the last," it said in a dozen stolen voices, all layered over each other. "You were so nice." Danny lifted the bone figure, her hand trembling. "Look at yourself," she said. It laughed, stepping forward. She threw the figure. It struck the base of the mirror, shattering the glass into a spiderweb of silver cracks. And for the first time, the skinwalker screamed. It was a scream that didn't belong to any world Danny knew. No lungs could have produced it. No throat could have sustained it. It was the sound of a thing being seen, truly seen, for what it was. A sound of ancient shame, of horror turned inward. It clawed at the sides of its head, nails tearing its skin, peeling back its borrowed face like it was trying to escape its own body. The cracked mirror pulsed with unnatural light. Inside it, the reflection was worse. The creature didn't look human at all now. Its form writhed in the glass, shifting between every face it had ever stolen: Jamie, Cameron, other strangers Danny had never seen. Blurring into a patchwork of limbs, teeth, hair, and bone, all stitched together by shadows. "Nil," it howled, voice splitting into fragments. "Not me. Not me. Not me." Danny backed away as the mirror began to hum. Low at first, but rising, like pressure building behind the dam. The skinwalker's body convulsed. Its limbs twisted back on themselves. Its spine arched like a breaking bow. The mirror flashed, once, twice. Each time showing it unraveling further, its pieces coming apart, identity by identity, until there was nothing left but a shell, skin hanging loose over bones, like a deflated suit. And then, it shattered. The mirror exploded into white fire. The sound flattened everything around it. Trees bent. The air imploded. Danny threw her arms up, but the force lifted her off her feet and hurled her backward into the underbrush. She hit the ground hard. Then, silence. Not the terrifying, watching silence from before, but the deep, still hush of something that's ended. It took her a long moment to open her eyes. The clearing was gone. No lanterns. No ring of stones. Just trees again, as if the forest had decided to pretend none of it had happened. But the air smelled clean. Empty. Whatever had made its home here was gone. Danny pushed herself up. Her body screamed in protest, but she was alive. She checked her limbs, her ribs, her head. Bruised, cut, but breathing. She staggered forward. No path. No trail. But a soft light began to glow between the trees. Dawn. She followed it, one step at a time, until the forest began to thin and the sky turned the faintest shade of pale blue. When she finally stumbled onto the gravel access road near Devil's Backbone, a rescue team was already there. Later, they said a hiker heard screaming echoing through the canyon and called it in. Later, they said Danny was lucky. She didn't feel lucky. In the hospital, no one believed her. They called it trauma. Hallucination. Stress. She let them make sense of it the only way they knew how. But she kept the scar. And every once in a while, in the mirror, just for a second, she swore she saw someone else looking back. Someone with hollow eyes. She moved back home after that. Left the dorms. Dropped out before finals. Her parents didn't argue. They were just glad she was alive, though they never said it out loud. Her mom walked on eggshells. Her dad drank more. Nobody mentioned Jamie or Cameron. And Danny didn't offer their names. Weeks passed. Then months. The world moved on. But she didn't. She barely slept. When she did, it was never for long, and always with the closet light on. The dreams came every night. Of the forest. Of the sound the skinwalker made when it mimicked crying. Of the way Jamie's fingers had clawed the dirt before being dragged away. Worse were the mirrors. She started avoiding them. Covered the bathroom mirror with a towel. Removed the one in her bedroom. But you can't escape reflections forever. She saw herself in windows. In the screen of her turned-off phone. In puddles after it rained. And sometimes, just for a breath, her eyes weren't her own. They were deeper. Empty. Staring back. One night in late October, Danny's phone buzzed. An unknown number. No message. Just a photo. She almost didn't open it. But she did. It was a picture of the forest. Familiar trees, bare and skeletal. A clearing just beyond. And in the foreground, her. Facing away. Standing alone. A red flare gun clutched in one hand. The timestamp read 1:03 a.m. Her stomach dropped. She checked the time. 1:04 a.m. She was home. She hadn't left the house. Had she? She ran to her bedroom window and looked out. Street lamps. Empty road. Nothing. Then she turned to the mirror at the end of the hallway, the one she had covered last week but hadn't gotten around to taking down. The towel was gone, and her reflection was smiling. But she wasn't. She stepped back. The reflection didn't. It stayed there, grin stretching unnaturally wide, as a voice filled her head, not heard, but felt, like teeth sinking into the back of her thoughts. You showed me what I was. Now I'll show you what you'll become. The lights flickered, and the mirror began to ripple, like the surface of water disturbed by something rising beneath. Danny staggered away from the mirror, her legs trembling beneath her like they barely remembered how to hold her weight. The hallway seemed to lengthen behind her, the walls stretching, darkening, as if the house itself was shifting, responding to the thing behind the glass. Her reflection was still smiling, but the smile was no longer hers. It twisted upward in grotesque angles, too wide, as if the muscles in her face were being pulled by hooks. The eyes had gone hollow again, black pits that seemed to leak darkness into the mirror around them. And then the reflection moved, not mimicking her, not echoing. It reached forward. The glass bulged where its hand pressed, warping outward like a thin sheet of ice before it breaks. Cracks spiderwebbed across the surface, and that hum, the one from the forest, the one that made her teeth ache, began to build again. She turned and ran, down the stairs, through the living room, out the front door into the chilled night air. Her breath burst in white plumes. The wind was biting, but it was quiet, too quiet. The street was empty. No cars, no people, not even the sound of a distant dog or an engine. Just the creak of wind chimes from the house across the street and the faint scrape of something dragging behind her. She spun around. Nothing. But when she looked at the windows of her house, every one of them reflected that same image, her, standing still inside, smiling back with those hollow, borrowed eyes. She backed away, trembling, clutching her arms. Her phone buzzed again. Another photo. She didn't want to look, but her thumb opened it on instinct. This time, it was her bedroom. She was sitting on her bed, hands folded in her lap. The smile still on her face. The timestamp. Now. She screamed and dropped the phone, staggering backward into the street. Her head spun. Was she going insane? Had she ever left the forest? Had it ever ended? The air shifted around her, suddenly heavier. A new voice whispered in her ear, no mimicry this time. No attempt at humanity. Just a low, dry rasp like leaves crushed in an old mouth. We never left you. You wore us too. And behind her, a shadow rose. Long and thin and wrong, stretching out under a moonless sky, taller than the houses, its arms reaching down like branches aching to wrap her in. Danny ran. Again. She didn't know where to go. There was no forest now, no ranger station, no trail. But it didn't matter. Because now, the skinwalker was inside the mirrors, and mirrors are everywhere. Streetlights flickered as she sprinted past them, casting strobing shadows that made the world stutter around her. Every pane of glass she passed, windshields, storefronts, puddles, flashed with glimpses of herself. Not as she was now. As the thing she was becoming. Sometimes the smile was there. Sometimes it was a twist of flesh, a featureless mask sagging over a too-thin frame. Once, in the reflection of a parked car's window, she saw herself walking backwards, mouth open, tongue twitching in slow, delighted spasms. She screamed and ran harder. The city, if it could still be called that, had gone utterly silent. No distant sirens. No lights in the homes. It felt like the world had hollowed itself out, leaving her in a husk of memory and reflection. She stumbled into an alley, legs giving way. Her palms slapped against cold pavement, and for a moment, she simply lay there, chest heaving. The night pressed in from all sides. Her phone buzzed again. No number. No sound. Just a notification, new voicemail. She almost didn't play it. But her hand moved on its own. There was static at first. Then a voice, her voice. But not from any recording she remembered. It was breathy, confused, like someone waking up from a long sleep. Hello. Is someone there? I think I'm lost. I don't know where I am. It's dark. Cold. A pause. I think I'm you. And then came the laughter. Not from her. From something standing behind her in the message. A wet, rattling sound like lungs full of river water. Danny dropped the phone. She looked up and caught her reflection in a broken shard of mirror leaning against the alley wall. She wasn't smiling. But her reflection was. It reached out, hand pressing to the inside of the glass, and its lips moved, slow and deliberate. Let me in. The shard shivered, warping at the edges. The sound of glass groaning under pressure filled the air. Danny scrambled back. She didn't know how to fight this. The forest rules were gone. The figure, the mirror, the burning flare, it had all been part of its game, part of the illusion. There was no escaping it now. It wasn't just mimicking her anymore. It was invading her. She grabbed a nearby brick and, without thinking, smashed the mirror shard. The reflection disappeared in a burst of glittering fragments. For a second, everything went still. Then, all around her, every reflective surface within sight began to ripple. Windows, puddles, shiny car doors, even the metallic side of a trash bin. From each one, a different version of herself stepped forward. Some bloody, some broken, some smiling. And all of them began to walk toward her in perfect, soundless unison. Danny scrambled backward, chest tightening as the faceless copies closed the distance in slow, unnatural strides. Each one moved with the same jerky, twitching gait, like marionettes pulled by invisible strings, but their eyes burned with cold intent, empty sockets swallowing the faint streetlight. Her breath caught when one stepped forward, reaching out with hands too long, fingers curling like claws. Its face flickered. Jamie's smile, Cameron's eyes, then a blank mask of pale skin cracked and peeling. No, Danny whispered, shaking her head. No, this isn't me. But the reflection smiled wider, lips stretching into impossible grins that flickered like static. Suddenly, a voice cut through the silence, sharp and steady like a blade slicing through fog. Danny. She whipped around to see the woman from the clearing, the one who'd given her the bone figure, standing at the alley's entrance. Her eyes glowed faintly under the dim streetlights, dark and knowing. You can't run anymore, the woman said softly, stepping forward. They are part of you now. The skinwalker isn't just outside, it's inside. But it's afraid of truth. Danny's heart pounded. Truth? She asked, voice barely a whisper. The woman nodded, pulling a small, shining shard from a pouch. This is a fragment of the last mirror. It holds a shard of you, the you before the darkness began. Use it. She handed it to Danny, who took it hesitantly. The reflections closed in. Danny lifted the shard, holding it before her like a shield. The closest reflection lunged. The shard glowed, pure white light pulsing through its jagged edges. The reflection screamed, silent but fierce, as the light struck it, and it disintegrated into dust, vanishing with a wind like sighing paper. One by one, Danny raised the shard. Light burst from it, burning through each reflection until they shattered and blew away like ash in a storm. The alley fell silent. Only Danny and the woman remained. The woman smiled faintly. The battle is not over. But you have the weapon now. Guard yourself. Annie's hands trembled, but she nodded. In the distance, the first weak glimmers of dawn bled into the sky. And for the first time in what felt like forever, Danny felt hope. Danny stood motionless as the sky lightened, the shard still pulsing faintly in her palm. The alleys and streets around her slowly came back into focus, not twisted shadows, but ordinary concrete and brick bathed in soft dawn. The reflections were gone, dissolved like nightmares at sunrise. The woman watched her with calm eyes. "You carry a heavy burden now," she said. "The skinwalker isn't just a creature. It's a curse woven into the bones of this land, into the stories told in whispers. It feeds on fear, on loss, on the parts of us we hide away. But you," she paused, voice sharp, "you've faced it. You've named it. And that changes everything." Danny swallowed, trying to steady her breath. "But it's still inside me. It can come back anytime, right?" The woman nodded slowly. "Yes. That's why you need to remember who you were before. Hold on to that piece of yourself like your life depends on it, because it does. Every mirror, every reflection can be a doorway. They'll keep trying to break through." Danny looked down at the shard. The edges glowed faintly, warm and steady now. She understood what it was, a piece of herself untouched by the darkness, a fragment strong enough to fight back. The woman turned, beginning to walk away into the now brightening city. "I will watch from the shadows. If you need me, you'll know where to find me." Danny called after her, voice trembling but resolute. "Wait, what are you?" The woman glanced back, a flicker of sadness in her eyes. "A guardian. Or maybe just another lost soul who's learned to live with the monsters." Then she vanished into the light. Alone again, Danny took a deep breath and looked around. The world was waking up, cars starting, distant voices, birdsong. But she was different. She was marked. The curse was inside her now, woven deep, but so was the shard, a spark of light to hold on to when the darkness tried to take over. Danny slipped the shard into her pocket and started walking home, the first real step in a long fight to reclaim herself. Because some monsters hide in shadows. But the bravest thing is to face them, reflected back, in the light. Days bled into weeks, and Danny's world shifted into a strange new rhythm, one where every glance at a mirror sent a pulse of cold dread through her veins, but also a fierce determination. She kept the shard close, tucked beneath her shirt, a silent talisman against the creeping dark. Her nights were restless, haunted by flickers of shadow just beyond the edges of sleep. Sometimes she'd wake to the faintest whisper brushing her ear, a voice that sounded almost like Jamie's or Cameron's, twisted and broken, but begging, always begging. She never answered. Instead, she learned to fight back. She studied everything she could find. Ancient myths, tribal legends, old folklore whispered by the few who still remembered. The skinwalker wasn't just a monster of flesh and teeth, it was a predator of identity, a parasite feeding on the pieces of souls it could steal and wear. One evening, beneath a bruised purple sky, Danny sat on the edge of a cracked city fountain. The shard lay in her palm, warm and pulsing like a heartbeat. Her phone vibrated, a message from an unknown number. "You cannot hide. We are all around." Her breath hitched. But this time, she didn't panic. Instead, she typed back, "Then I'll find you first." Because now, Danny was no longer just a scared girl running from something in the dark. She was a hunter. And the hunt had only just begun. The message came back almost instantly. Good. Come to the place where shadows breathe. Danny's fingers trembled, but she steeled herself. She knew what that meant. The old part of town. The forgotten streets where no one dared linger after dusk, where the city's history felt thick enough to choke on. She packed a small bag, the shard wrapped in cloth, a flashlight, a pocket knife, and a flare gun she'd taken from the ranger station, the only weapon she'd found that seemed to sting the skinwalker's essence. As night swallowed the city, she moved with purpose, slipping through alleys and side streets until she reached the heart of the forgotten district. The air was heavy, smelling of damp stone and something darker, something ancient and waiting. Ahead, the buildings leaned close, casting deep shadows that flickered and shifted like living things. And then she saw it. A doorway carved from blackened wood, set into a crumbling brick wall. Above it, faded symbols glowed faintly, a circle with jagged teeth, an eye cracked open. The threshold seemed to breathe, a slow exhale of cold mist curling around her boots. Danny took a deep breath, tightened her grip on the shard, and stepped inside. The darkness closed behind her like a mouth. And somewhere deep within, the skinwalker waited, patient, hungry, and ready to claim what it thought was lost. But Danny was ready to fight. This time, she would not run. This time, she would end it. The air inside the doorway was thick and cold, like breathing through a wet wool blanket. Danny's flashlight barely pierced the gloom, casting jittery shadows that danced along the rough stone walls. The corridor stretched forward, narrow, twisting, and lined with strange carvings that pulsed faintly with an unholy light. Her heartbeat pounded in her ears as she moved deeper, the shard warm and steady in her palm. Every step felt heavier, as if the darkness was trying to pull her down, wrap around her like a suffocating cloak. Then she heard it. The faintest scraping, like nails against bone, coming from somewhere ahead. She froze. The walls themselves seemed to close in. A low growl rumbled through the corridor, vibrating in her chest. The temperature dropped further, breath turning to frost on her lips. "Show yourself," Danny whispered, voice shaking but defiant. From the shadows, a figure emerged. Not fully formed, but shifting, a grotesque mass of flesh and shadows that flickered between human and beast. Eyes like burning coals stared at her, nostrils flaring with the scent of death. The skinwalker. It stepped forward, limbs bending and twisting impossibly as it advanced. Danny raised the shard, its light flaring to life, pushing the darkness back in sharp, white arcs. The creature hissed, recoiling but snarling. "You cannot escape what you are," it spat, voice layered with every stolen voice it had ever worn. "But I can choose what I become," Danny said, voice steadier now. With a sudden cry, she hurled the shard forward. It struck the creature in the chest, exploding in a burst of searing light that shattered the shadows like glass. The skinwalker screamed, a sound so raw and ancient it shook the very walls. And then, as the light faded, Danny saw. Not a monster. Not a curse. But a lost soul, shattered and broken, begging for release. Tears stung Danny's eyes as she stepped closer, lowering her voice to a whisper. "It's over." The creature's form flickered once more before dissolving into a cascade of shimmering dust. Silence. The corridor brightened, the carvings glowing softly like stars. Danny stood alone, trembling but victorious. She had faced the darkness, and she had won. Outside, dawn was breaking. The world was waking. And so was she. Danny stumbled out of the doorway as the first true rays of sunlight spilled over the horizon, washing the forgotten district in soft gold. The cold grip of the night loosened, replaced by a quiet warmth that seeped into her bones and whispered of new beginnings. She sank onto the cracked steps of a nearby stoop, breathing hard. The shard, now dim and lifeless, rested on her palm. The weight of it felt lighter, as if the burden she'd carried for so long had finally begun to lift. Her mind swirled with memories, faces she'd seen in the mirrors, the echo of voices that had haunted her dreams, the endless twisting maze of fear and doubt. But now they felt distant, like ghosts finally laid to rest. A gentle breeze stirred the leaves around her feet, carrying the faint scent of pine and earth, the smell of the forest she'd once fled. Danny closed her eyes and let herself feel it, hope. Hope that the skinwalker's shadow had finally receded. Hope that she could reclaim the life it had tried to steal. She stood slowly, shoulders squared against the new day. There would be scars, reminders of the darkness. But there was also strength. A fierce, unyielding spark that refused to be snuffed out. As the city stirred awake around her, Danny walked forward, no longer running. The hunt was over. And in the quiet dawn, she whispered a promise to herself, I am still here. I am still me. But as Danny turned to leave, a sudden chill brushed the back of her neck, a subtle shift in the morning air that made her skin crawl. She stopped, heart tightening once more. The warmth of dawn felt fragile, as if the night was reluctant to release its hold. Her eyes caught movement in the reflection of a nearby shop window. A flicker. Not her own. A shadowy figure, just beyond the glass, watching. Its eyes, empty, hollow, locked onto hers. Danny's breath hitched. The skinwalker's essence was not so easily destroyed. It was a wound, a stain that bled into every mirror, every shadow, every whispered corner of the world. She clenched her fists, the shard's faint glow reigniting deep within her pocket. The battle had ended, but the war was far from over. And Danny knew, with a certainty that settled cold and sharp in her bones, as long as there were reflections, as long as darkness breathed beneath the light, the skinwalker would never truly be gone. But neither would she. Danny squared her shoulders, stepping closer to the glass. The shadow lingered, a smear of darkness against the morning light, its shape twisting and shifting like smoke caught in a sudden draft. It didn't move away. It didn't blink. She met its gaze, empty, merciless, and raised her hand, fingers trembling but resolute. Not today, she said, voice steady. Not ever. The shard pulsed sharply inside her pocket, responding to her will. She pulled it free, holding it up so the morning sun caught the edges, sending shards of light fracturing across the pavement. The shadow writhed, recoiling as if burned by the radiance. For a heartbeat, the world seemed to hold its breath, then the figure dissolved into the glass, shattered into a million fractured reflections, each one flickering and vanishing like dying stars. Danny lowered the shard and exhaled, a fierce relief washing over her. She was scarred. She was marked. But she was free, for now. With the rising sun warming her face, Danny turned away from the shattered reflections and stepped fully into the day. The skinwalker's darkness still lingered, a whisper beneath the noise of the world. But she carried a light fierce enough to meet it. And that was enough. For today. The days that followed were quieter, but never truly peaceful. Danny found herself scanning every reflective surface. The windows of passing cars, the gleam of polished counters, the sheen of water in puddles, with a cautious vigilance that had become a part of her existence. The shard, though no longer glowing, remained tucked close to her heart, a talisman and a reminder. She reconnected with her parents, hesitant but determined, sharing fragments of her ordeal in whispered conversations that trembled on the edge of disbelief and hope. Her mother's eyes filled with tears, her father's arms wrapped around her with a strength that said, "We'll get through this." Even in daylight, shadows lurked. Sometimes, in the corner of her vision, Danny caught fleeting movements, just beyond sight, a ripple in a window, a fleeting silhouette behind a curtain. The skinwalker was patient, relentless. It had taught her that fear was its weapon, but it had underestimated something else, her will. One evening, as the city sank into twilight, Danny stood before a mirror in her small apartment. She gazed deeply into her own eyes, steady, clear, and unbroken. "I am here," she said softly. "I am still me." And in that moment, the reflection smiled back, not with hollow eyes or twisted lips, but with the fierce, unyielding light of someone who had walked through darkness and refused to be consumed. The hunt was far from over. But Danny was ready. Whatever came next, she would face it. Not as prey, but as a warrior. And that was the promise she intended to keep. Weeks turned into months, and slowly, Danny began to rebuild the fragile threads of a life the skinwalker had tried to unravel. She returned to school, where whispers still floated in the corridors, rumors of her disappearance, of the strange things that had happened, but she met them all with a quiet strength that silenced curiosity. At night, she kept the shard hidden beneath her pillow, a talisman of light in the darkness. She learned to carry a small mirror in her bag, catching glimpses of her reflection often, reaffirming her own presence in a world that wanted to blur her identity. But the skinwalker's shadow lingered, always just beneath the surface, a whisper in the edges of mirrors and windows. Sometimes, when the wind shifted just right, Danny thought she heard the faintest rasp of a voice, half-remembered and full of menace. One evening, as she walked home under a sky bruised with gathering storm clouds, a sudden chill crawled down her spine. The streets around her dimmed inexplicably, the usual hum of life fading into a suffocating silence. Her breath caught as a figure stepped out from the shadows, a woman cloaked in shifting darkness, eyes gleaming with cold amusement. "You're strong," the figure said, voice like dry leaves. "But the skinwalker is not so easily defeated. We are many. We are endless." Danny's grip tightened on the shard she had brought, its surface smooth and warm. "Then I'll be endless too," Danny replied, stepping forward, the fire in her eyes matching the storm overhead. The battle was not over. But neither was she. The woman's smile twisted, dark and sharp as broken glass. "Bold words for a fragile girl," she sneered, stepping closer until the shadows around her writhed like living things, wrapping the air with a suffocating chill. Danny lifted the shard, feeling the familiar pulse beneath her fingers, a steady heartbeat of light that seemed to grow stronger with her resolve. "I'm not fragile," Danny said, voice low but unwavering. "I'm everything you're not. I'm human. I'm real." The air thickened as the woman's form shifted, dissolving into a swarm of black smoke that circled Danny like a storm ready to break. The shadows whispered, voices layered and twisted, fragments of the lost, the stolen, the broken. But Danny stood firm. She closed her eyes briefly, centering herself. When she opened them, they burned with fierce clarity. With a shout that shattered the silence, she thrust the shard forward. A beam of pure, white light shot from the fragment, slicing through the swirling darkness. The shadows screamed, anguished, furious, and began to unravel, their hold breaking apart like smoke caught in a gust of wind. The woman's voice faltered, a hiss fading into silence as the last tendrils of shadow dispersed. When the light dimmed, Danny was alone again, standing tall amid the dissipating night. The storm had passed. But Danny knew this victory was not the end. It was a promise, a warning. The darkness would return, and so would she. Stronger, unbroken, unstoppable. The dawn that broke after the storm was crisp and clear, sunlight pouring through Danny's bedroom window in golden streams. She lay still for a moment, letting the warmth seep into her chilled skin, but the weight of what she'd faced pressed heavily on her chest. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand, a single message from an unknown number. "This is only the beginning." Danny sat up, eyes narrowing. The message felt like a challenge, an echo from the dark corners of her fight that refused to be silenced. But instead of fear, a steady calm settled over her. She reached beneath her pillow, fingers closing around the shard, cool and reassuring. For the first time since it all began, she didn't feel alone. She was a survivor, a warrior. And whatever shadows waited in the cracks of the world, she would meet them head on. Because Danny had learned something no darkness could steal. The fiercest light always burns from within. With that, she rose, ready to face whatever came next. And this time, she was ready. The weeks that followed were a strange balance of normalcy and vigilance. Danny returned to the rhythms of daily life, classes, friends, even the occasional laughter. But beneath the surface, she remained alert, attuned to the faintest flicker of movement in the periphery of her vision. The shard, now dulled in its glow, had become a part of her. Both a comfort and a reminder. She kept it close, sometimes tracing its smooth edges when doubt crept in, when the lingering shadows tried to whisper lies. One evening, as Danny walked home through the quiet streets, the sun dipped low, casting long shadows that stretched like fingers across the pavement. Her breath was steady, her steps sure, but the hairs on the back of her neck prickled. From the corner of her eye, she caught movement. A figure slipping silently from the alleyway, its form fluid and shifting, never fully settled. Her heart quickened, but she didn't run. Instead, she reached into her pocket and grasped the shard. "Not tonight," she said firmly. The figure paused, its eyes, glowing faintly like embers, locking onto hers. "You've grown stronger," it said, voice low and gravelly. But the skinwalker remembers. Danny squared her shoulders, the shard pulsing faintly in response. "Then I'll remind it who I am." The creature lunged, and Danny met it with a flash of light, bright, pure, and unyielding. The fight wasn't over. It never would be. But Danny was no longer afraid. She was ready. The light from the shard surged through Danny's palm like a sudden blaze, illuminating the narrow street in stark white. The skinwalker's form convulsed, shifting and writhing as if caught in a storm of flames, its amber-like eyes flaring brighter before they finally dimmed. With a guttural hiss, the creature staggered back into the shadows, dissolving like smoke caught in a strong wind. The silence that followed was heavy but not empty, charged with something raw and electric. Danny stood, chest heaving, the shard warm against her skin. She knew this was only a brief reprieve. The skinwalker was patient, a shadow that ebbed and flowed, always hunting. But so was she. Turning toward the glowing horizon where the city lights began to flicker on, Danny whispered, "I'm not yours. Not now. Not ever." She tucked the shard back into her pocket, feeling its steady pulse, a heartbeat intertwined with her own. Behind her, the shadows receded. Ahead, the city breathed with possibility. And Danny, scarred but unbroken, walked forward into the rising night, ready for whatever darkness dared to follow. Beneath the city's flickering streetlights, Danny's footsteps echoed like a heartbeat, steady, unyielding. The night was alive with whispers, the wind carrying voices just beyond understanding, but she no longer flinched. Each breath was a claim, each step a declaration. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from the unknown number. You cannot hide forever. Her fingers tightened around the shard in her pocket. The glow was faint but alive, as if feeding on her resolve. She stopped beneath an ancient oak tree, its gnarled branches reaching like claws toward the sky. Memories stirred, a warning from the woman in the alley, the stories she'd uncovered, the countless nights spent staring into mirrors afraid to see the shadow behind her reflection. But Danny smiled, fierce and unshaken. No, she whispered into the night. I won't hide. The wind stirred the leaves, carrying away her words like a promise. Ahead, the shadows stirred, watching, waiting. But Danny was ready. And this time, the hunter would become the hunted. The wind twisted around Danny like a living thing, carrying the scent of rain and earth, sharpening the night's chill. She tightened her grip on the shard, its pulse syncing with the steady thrum of her own heartbeat. Somewhere deep in the darkness, the skinwalker third, a ripple of movement too quick for her eyes to catch, a flicker, a whisper. Her phone buzzed once more, the screen lighting up with a new message. You are stronger than I thought. But strength fades. Danny swallowed the rising fear and typed back with hands steady despite the cold knot in her stomach. Then I will make sure it never fades. The streetlights flickered as the night deepened, shadows thickening into walls that seemed to press closer. She sensed the presence before she saw it, a low growl, the subtle shift of air. From the blackness stepped a figure, half man, half beast, eyes burning with hunger and ancient rage. The skinwalker. Its form shifted again, taking shape and dissolving like smoke caught in a storm, but Danny stood her ground. She pulled the shard from her pocket and held it high, its light cutting through the night like a blade. You will not have me, she said, voice clear and unyielding. The creature lunged, and Danny met it with a light that refused to be snuffed out. The shard flared like a flare in Danny's hand, blasting pure white light into the skinwalker's face. The creature recoiled, snarling. A sound that seemed to ripple from some dark place beyond this world, ancient and raw. Its form twisted violently, oscillating between monstrous and disturbingly human, revealing glimpses of the lost souls it had consumed. Danny's breath came hard, her heart hammering, but she didn't flinch. She stepped forward, the light from the shard growing stronger, pushing the shadows back inch by inch. You don't own me, she hissed, voice steady and fierce. Not anymore. The skinwalker screamed, of a terrible sound that shattered the stillness of the night, clawing at the very edges of reality. It surged toward her, a storm of darkness and rage, but Danny held her ground, wielding the shard like a blade forged from light and willpower. With a final, desperate howl, the creature dissipated, shadows melting into the air like smoke carried on the wind. Danny dropped to her knees, the shard dimming, her body trembling with exhaustion and relief. The battle had been brutal, but for the first time, she felt something she hadn't known in months, victory. But deep in the silence, she knew the war was far from over. Because darkness always waits, always hunts, and she would be ready. The first light of dawn crept through the cracked blinds, painting Danny's room in pale gold. She lay curled on the floor, exhaustion dragging at her muscles, but beneath the weariness was a fierce pulse of triumph. For the first time since the nightmare began, she felt the fragile bloom of hope. Her phone lay beside her, screen dark now, no new messages, no whispers from the void. The shard rested on the floor, dull and cool, its battle-worn surface catching the morning light. Slowly, Danny sat up, eyes scanning her reflection in the cracked mirror across the room. The girl staring back bore the marks of the fight, dark circles beneath her eyes, bruises faded but not gone. But there was something else, something stronger. A quiet resolve that no shadow could steal. She touched the shard gently, then pocketed it, rising to her feet. Outside, the city stirred to life, unaware of the battles fought in its hidden corners. But Danny knew the truth. The Skinwalker was more than myth, more than monster. It was a darkness that fed on fear, on identity, on the thin line between who you are and who you could become. And though today she had won, the fight would continue. But now, she was no longer afraid, because she was ready. Stronger, unbroken, alive. And the shadows could take their best shot. She would still be standing. Months passed, and Danny learned to live with the quiet hum of vigilance beneath her daily routine. She no longer ran from reflections, no longer flinched at shadows. Instead, she embraced them as reminders of what she'd survived and what she had yet to conquer. The shard, once a blazing beacon of light, now felt like a part of her. Both armor and compass. She carried it everywhere, a talisman against the darkness lurking just beyond sight. One evening, as the city's skyline shimmered beneath a velvet sky, Danny stood atop a rooftop, gazing out over the sprawling labyrinth below. The wind tugged at her hair, carrying the scent of rain and distant fires, a scent both ancient and alive. Her phone buzzed softly. A message, but not the usual threat. "We see you." Her fingers tightened around the shard, pulse quickening, but fear no longer ruled her. She typed back, steady and sure, "Then you'll know this, I'm not alone." The reply came almost immediately, "Neither are we." Danny looked out into the night, shadows stretching like fingers toward the horizon. The Skinwalker was still out there, still hunting. But she wasn't just a lone girl with a glowing shard anymore. She was part of something greater. A spark of light in the endless dark. And the war was far from over. That night, Danny didn't sleep. Instead, she wandered the city streets, feeling the pulse of life around her, the chatter of late-night cafes, the distant hum of traffic, the occasional bark of a stray dog. Yet beneath it all, there was something else, a rhythm she had only begun to understand. The subtle weaving of light and shadow, of hidden battles waged in silence. Her phone buzzed again. Another message, "Meet us." Midnight. The old train yard. Her heart raced, but not with fear. This was the chance she'd waited for, to understand, to fight back with allies, to no longer be the hunted but the hunter. At midnight, she arrived at the desolate train yard. The moon cast ghostly silver light on rusted tracks and abandoned cars. Shadows pooled in corners, shifting and alive. From the darkness emerged figures, others like her. Survivors marked by the Skinwalker's touch, warriors armed with talismans, mirrors, and ancient knowledge. Eyes sharp, bodies ready. A man stepped forward, his voice steady. "We've been watching. You fought well, Danny. But the Skinwalker is only one piece of a larger darkness. Together, we stand a chance." Danny nodded, gripping the shard tighter. The city's quiet night was about to erupt into a battle older than time. And this time, she wouldn't fight alone. The man's words settled over Danny like a cloak, warm yet heavy with truth. Around her, the others. Some with eyes that glimmered like polished obsidian, others bearing faint scars tracing intricate symbols, stood silently, their presence both reassuring and formidable. "We call ourselves the Keepers," he said, "guardians of the fragile boundary between our world and the shadows that seek to consume it. The Skinwalker is just the beginning." A woman stepped forward next, her gaze piercing. They're shapeshifters, thieves of skin and soul, but there are others. Entities that prey on identity, on the very essence of being. We've been fighting for generations. Danny's mind raced. The shard pulsed faintly in her hand, its light a steady heartbeat in the dark. She felt, for the first time, like she belonged, not just a victim or survivor, but a fighter, a link in a chain unbroken by time. "What do you need me to do?" Danny asked, voice steady despite the whirlwind inside. The man smiled grimly. "Learn. Train. Prepare. Because the shadows don't just lurk in the night, they hide in plain sight, in whispers, in mirrors, in every corner where fear can grow." He gestured toward the rusted train cars. "Welcome to the Keepers. Your fight is far from over, but together, we might just turn the tide." As then he stepped forward, the shard's glow brightened, a beacon in the darkness. The war was only beginning, and she was ready to lead the charge. The train yard hummed with a quiet energy, as if the forgotten rails themselves remembered battles fought long ago. Danny followed the Keepers deeper into the labyrinth of rusted metal and shadowed corners, each step echoing her determination. Inside an old caboose converted into a makeshift headquarters, walls lined with mirrors framed in ancient wood, Danny was introduced to relics and symbols, tools to detect and repel the skinwalker and other shadow-born entities. The air smelled of dust, cedar, and something faintly metallic, like the tang of blood. A younger keeper named Louise handed her a slender mirror, no larger than her palm. "This catches reflections even when normal mirrors can't. It'll show you what's lurking, even if it tries to hide." Danny examined the mirror, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. "Training starts tomorrow," the man said, his voice softer now, almost gentle. "You'll learn to read shadows, to fight fear with light. But remember, your greatest weapon isn't the shard or the mirrors. It's your will to keep fighting." That night, Danny lay awake, the shard warm beneath her pillow, the tiny mirror resting on her nightstand like a silent guardian. Outside, the city breathed, a sprawling web of stories, secrets, and darkness. She closed her eyes and whispered a promise to the night. No matter what came, she would never stop. Because some shadows were meant to be chased away, and some lights were meant to burn forever. The first rays of dawn slipped through the cracked blinds, illuminating Danny's room in a soft amber glow. She sat up, heart pounding with a strange mixture of anticipation and fear. Today marked the beginning of her new life, not just as a survivor, but as a warrior. She reached for the shard, its surface cool and familiar in her hand, and then her gaze shifted to the small mirror Louise had given her. Together, they felt like extensions of herself. Tools to reclaim what the darkness had tried to steal. When she arrived at the Keeper's headquarters, the group was already gathered, a circle of faces etched with determination and scars, some visible, others hidden beneath layers of resolve. The leader, whose name Danny now knew as Marcus, spoke with a voice both commanding and patient. "Today, you start learning the language of shadows. To see what others cannot, to hear the silence between words, and to stand firm when the darkness whispers lies." Training was grueling. Danny learned to focus her mind, to calm the racing heart, and to wield light as both shield and sword. They practiced in rooms filled with mirrors, where reflections sometimes flickered with ghostly images, tests of their focus and courage. One evening, as Danny stood before a wall of fractured glass, a chilling sensation crept over her. The unmistakable presence of the skinwalker. Her breath caught, but this time she didn't flee. She raised her shard, steady and resolute. A dark shape flickered in the shards, a twisted smile, eyes full of malice, but Danny held her ground, the light from her shard casting ripples through the darkness. "I'm ready," she whispered. And this time, the shadows knew they were facing a force they could no longer consume. The air grew thick, almost suffocating, as the shadows coalesced into the skinwalker's terrifying form within the fractured glass. Its eyes burned like molten coals, its grin stretching impossibly wide, an expression that spoke of hunger and ancient cruelty. But Danny didn't flinch. Every fiber of her being pulsed with the light coursing from the shard in her hand, steady and unwavering. The room seemed to hold its breath. "You don't scare me anymore," she said, voice ringing clear despite the chill crawling up her spine. The creature lunged, an eruption of darkness and snarling rage, but Danny moved with a fluid grace she hadn't known she possessed. She shattered the mirrored wall with a beam of pure, searing light that scattered the skinwalker's form into shards of shadow. As the last wisp faded, silence reclaimed the room. Marcus stepped forward, his expression unreadable but proud. "You've done well. This is only the beginning. The skinwalker will return, stronger and more cunning. But so will you." Danny nodded, breath still catching. For the first time, the weight of the battle felt less like a burden and more like a purpose. She was no longer a victim caught in the skinwalker's web. She was a beacon blazing through the dark. And she would fight, relentlessly, until every shadow was chased away. Days bled into weeks, and Danny's training deepened. Not just in combat, but in understanding the shadows themselves. The keepers taught her to listen to silence, to feel the spaces between heartbeats where the skinwalker lurked, waiting for weakness. They spoke of ancient pacts and forgotten rituals, of light forged from memory and will. One night, as rain hammered the city and lightning tore the sky, Danny found herself drawn to an old library on the edge of town. The place was a labyrinth of dusty shelves and forgotten knowledge. A sanctuary for secrets the world had tried to bury. She thumbed through brittle pages filled with faded ink and strange symbols, searching for anything that could help her understand the skinwalker's origin and how to end the curse. Her fingers paused on a passage that chilled her. The skinwalker is not a creature born, but a spirit bound, an echo of vengeance and despair trapped between worlds. To free the stolen souls, the curse must be broken at its root. The heart of shadows, where darkness and light entwine in eternal struggle. Her breath caught. The heart of shadows, it sounded like a place, a moment, a power. She knew then what she had to do. The battle was no longer just for survival. It was for salvation. And Danny was ready to descend into the darkness itself. The rain hammered harder as Danny closed the ancient book, its weight heavier than the storm pressing outside. The words echoed relentlessly in her mind, the heart of shadows. Somewhere deep within the tangled web of darkness lay the source, the root of the curse that had stolen so much. She folded the fragile pages carefully and stood, the library's musty silence now charged with purpose. Outside, the city lights flickered in the rain, their reflections shimmering like ghostly fireflies on the wet pavement. Back at the keeper's base, Marcus listened as Danny recounted what she had discovered. His eyes darkened with a mixture of respect and worry. "The heart of shadows," he murmured. "No one has ventured close in centuries. It's a place where the veil between worlds thins. If the skinwalker is bound there, breaking the curse might mean confronting something far older and far more dangerous than we imagined." Louise stepped forward, placing a steady hand on Danny's shoulder. "You're not alone in this. We'll go with you." Danny's gaze hardened. She had fought alone for so long, now she had allies. But this journey, this descent into darkness, would test every ounce of their strength. As thunder rolled overhead, Danny looked out at the stormy night, feeling the shard's faint pulse against her palm. The heart of shadows awaited, and Danny was ready to face whatever waited in its depths. The night they set out was cloaked in a heavy fog that swallowed the city's familiar contours, turning streets into twisted veins of shadow. Danny, Marcus, Louise, and two other keepers moved silently through the maze of alleyways, their footsteps muffled against slick cobblestones. The shard, tucked securely in Danny's jacket pocket, pulsed softly, a heartbeat in the darkness. Their destination lay beyond the city's edge, a forgotten canyon where ancient legends whispered of a place where the worlds touched and bled into one another. The heart of shadows. As they neared the canyon's mouth, the air grew colder, the fog thickening until it was almost tangible, curling around them like grasping fingers. The group paused, senses heightened. The night seemed to hold its breath. "Stay close," Marcus whispered. "Once we cross this threshold, reality itself will twist." They stepped forward, crossing the invisible line where Earth met otherworldly darkness. The canyon's walls seemed to warp, stretching and contracting in impossible ways. Shadows flickered just beyond their vision, teasing, mocking. Suddenly, a low growl rippled through the air. From the mists emerged twisted shapes, half human, half beast, skins shifting and shimmering like living smoke. The skinwalker's kin, guardians of the curse. Danny's heart thundered, but she raised the shard, light flaring bright and fierce. "We finish this tonight," she said, voice steely. The battle erupted. A chaotic dance of light and shadow, screams and flashes, the air thick with primal fury. But Danny fought with something deeper than fear, hope. And in the heart of darkness, that might be the most powerful weapon of all. Blades of light sliced through the murky shadows as Danny and the keepers fought tooth and nail against the skinwalker's twisted kin. Each movement was a blur, claws raking, bodies shifting grotesquely between forms, snarls echoing like thunder rolling through the canyon walls. The air tasted of ozone and sweat, thick with the scent of ancient malice. Danny's shard burned fiercely in her palm, a beacon of defiance cutting through the darkness. She moved with purpose, weaving between the shifting creatures, each strike sending shards of shadow scattering like broken glass. Beside her, Louise fought with quiet ferocity, his mirror catching glimpses of the enemy's true shapes, allowing them to anticipate attacks. Marcus called out commands, his voice steady amid chaos, guiding their desperate stand. Suddenly, a massive form lunged from the mist, larger, darker, its eyes blazing with furious intelligence. The skinwalker's alpha. It roared, a sound that shook the very air, before crashing toward Danny. Time seemed to slow. Danny steadied herself, raising the shard high. The creature's jaws snapped inches from her face, but with a burst of light so pure it seared the soul, she plunged the shard forward. The beast howled, its form unraveling, tendrils of darkness dissolving into the mist. The canyon fell silent. Breathing hard, Danny looked to her companions, wounded, weary, but alive. The heart of shadows pulsed faintly beneath their feet, the hidden source of the darkness that had haunted generations. But with the skinwalker's alpha defeated, the first true crack had formed in the curse. Danny knew this was only the beginning. The shadows might linger, but the light, her light, would never fade. The silence that followed the alpha's collapse was heavy, almost sacred. The mist began to thin, revealing the jagged walls of the canyon etched with ancient symbols that pulsed faintly with an otherworldly glow. Beneath their feet, the ground seemed to hum, a slow, deep vibration like the heartbeat of the earth itself. Danny knelt, pressing the shard gently into the dirt where the pulse was strongest. The light flared, illuminating the carvings around them. Depictions of battles fought in forgotten ages, warriors standing against creeping darkness, binding shadows with courage and sacrifice. Marcus's voice broke the stillness. This is it. The true source, the heart of shadows. It's not just a place, it's a seal, a prison. The darkness here has been growing, feeding on fear and pain, twisting souls into monsters like the Skinwalker. Louise stared into the depths of the glowing symbols. If we can shatter this seal, if we can release whatever's trapped here, maybe the curse will finally be broken. Danny's gaze hardened. The path ahead was clear, but perilous. To free the stolen souls and end the curse, they would have to face not just the darkness outside, but the shadows within themselves. With a deep breath, she raised the shard high. Then let's finish this. For all of us. As the shard's light pierced the heart of the canyon, the ground trembled and the shadows stirred, awakened, angry, but vulnerable. The final battle was at hand. The moment Danny pressed the shard against the pulsating symbol etched into the canyon floor, a low rumble surged through the earth, growing into a deafening roar. The ground beneath them cracked, sending splinters of stone spiraling into the air. Shadows recoiled but then writhed with renewed fury, twisting into grotesque forms more nightmarish than any they'd faced before. From the ruptured earth rose a colossal figure, an embodiment of the darkness itself. Its eyes were voids that swallowed light, its limbs like tangled branches dripping with black ichor. The very air around it warped, freezing the breath in their lungs, bending the world into a nightmare landscape. "This is the heart of shadows," Marcus whispered, his voice trembling yet resolute. "The source of the curse, the prison of souls stolen and broken." Danny felt the shard pulse violently in her hand, as if alive, syncing with the rhythm of her heartbeat. The creature roared, a sound that cracked the sky and shook the canyon walls. Louise raised his mirror, capturing the shadow beast's image and reflecting a fractured, flickering light. "We have to weaken it, break its connection to the darkness, then the shard conceal it." The keepers formed a circle around Danny, their talismans glowing with ancient power. The air hummed with energy as they began a chant, words older than memory, weaving light into a binding net. Danny stepped forward, her voice steady. "I am the light that shatters the dark. I am the will that breaks the chains." The shadow behemoth lunged, but the combined force of the keeper's light held it at bay. Danny focused, driving the shard into the heart of the symbol. Light exploded outward, searing the darkness, unraveling the curse thread by thread. The monster's agonized scream filled the night as shadows fractured and the stolen souls emerged. Whispers of lost lives, freed from their torment, swirling around Danny like a shimmering gale. With a final pulse, the shard blazed, sealing the heart of shadows and casting the canyon into a brilliant dawn. Exhausted but triumphant, Danny collapsed to her knees, the weight of victory settling over her. The curse was broken. The shadows would no longer hunt. And the light, her light, would burn eternal. The first true dawn in what felt like an eternity spilled across the canyon, flooding the jagged walls with golden light. The oppressive weight of darkness lifted, replaced by a fragile, trembling peace. The freed souls swirled around Danny and the keepers, their whispers like soft breezes carrying gratitude and farewell, dissolving into the morning air. Danny's breath came in ragged gasps as she sank to the rocky ground, the shard's glow dimming to a steady warmth in her palm. Around her, the others gathered close, sharing tired smiles and silent nods, wounded but unbroken. Marcus helped her to her feet. "You did it, Danny. You ended the curse." She shook her head slowly, a small smile breaking through the exhaustion. "We did it. All of us." Louise wiped sweat and grime from his brow. "There will always be shadows. But now, They won't be able to take hold like before. Not while we're here." Danny looked out across the canyon, the rising sun painting the sky in hues of amber and rose. Somewhere in the depths of the earth, the darkness still lurked, but it was sealed, chained by light and courage. She felt the shard grow cold in her hand, its purpose fulfilled, yet somehow still alive, an eternal reminder of the battle fought and won. As the keepers began their journey back to the city, Danny glanced once more at the fading mist. She knew the shadows might return someday, as they always did, but she was ready. Because she had become more than a survivor. She had become the light that would never fade. And the story of the skinwalker, the curse, the fight, the hope, would live on in her. Years later, Danny stood on the same rooftop where her nightmare had begun, the city sprawling beneath her like a living organism. The shard, now set into a pendant around her neck, was cool against her skin. A silent testament to battles fought and won. The keepers had grown, their numbers swelling with those who refused to bow to fear. They were watchers, warriors, and guardians, bound by a promise as old as time, to protect the light, to chase away the shadows. Her phone vibrated softly. A message glowed on the screen, the balance shifts again. Danny's eyes narrowed, a familiar fire kindling within. The darkness was never truly gone, it only waited. But so was she. With a steadying breath, she slipped the pendant beneath her shirt and stepped into the night. The war was eternal, and Danny was ready. Because some lights never go out. Years later, Danny stood on the same rooftop where her nightmare had begun, the city sprawling beneath her like a living organism. The shard, now set into a pendant around her neck, was cool against her skin, a silent testament to battles fought and won. The keepers had grown, their numbers swelling with those who refused to bow to fear. They were watchers, warriors, and guardians, bound by a promise as old as time, to protect the light, to chase away the shadows. Her phone vibrated softly. A message glowed on the screen, the balance shifts again. Danny's eyes narrowed, a familiar fire kindling within. The darkness was never truly gone, it only waited. But so was she. With a steadying breath, she slipped the pendant beneath her shirt and stepped into the night. The war was eternal, and Danny was ready. Because some lights never go out. The city beneath Danny's feet pulsed with restless energy, neon signs flickering like distant stars against the creeping fog. The message weighed heavy on her mind. The balance shifting meant new dangers, new shadows rising to test the fragile peace. She pulled her jacket tighter against the cold, eyes scanning the streets below. Somewhere out there, the darkness was stirring, weaving its ancient threads back into the world. Her phone buzzed again, a new message appearing, "We need you." The old ways are waking. Danny's jaw clenched. The old ways, the forgotten rituals, the primal forces that once ruled before the world forgot them, were never truly gone. They were simply waiting, hungry and patient. She took a deep breath, feeling the shard's faint pulse against her chest. The light inside her was steady, unyielding. With a determined step, she descended from the rooftop, disappearing into the city's maze. The night was alive, and Danny was ready to face whatever shadows dared to rise. The city's pulse quickened as Danny moved through its labyrinthine streets, shadows lengthening and twisting unnaturally under flickering streetlights. The air was thick with unease, a silent warning whispered on the wind. She could feel it in her bones. Something ancient was awakening, something that even the keepers had never fully understood. Her phone buzzed again, this time with coordinates and a single word, sanctuary. She knew that place, a hidden enclave where the oldest keepers had gathered, steeped in forgotten knowledge and rituals long abandoned by the modern world. As she approached the unmarked door in a forgotten alley, Danny's fingers tightened around her pendant. The shard's light flared softly, resonating with the building's worn stones. Inside, a circle of hooded figures awaited, their faces shadowed but eyes burning with recognition and urgency. A voice broke the silence. "The heart of shadows has not healed, it festers. The old ways must be invoked once more, or the darkness will consume us all." Danny stepped forward, resolve hardening. The war was far from over. But together, they would face the rising night. Because some battles are fought not just with light, but with the courage to embrace the dark. The hooded figures formed a tight circle around a worn altar etched with symbols that pulsed faintly in the dim light. Danny stepped closer, her breath steady despite the weight settling on her chest. The room smelled of old incense and earth, thick with the power of ancient rites. One of the keepers, a woman whose eyes gleamed like polished obsidian, spoke softly, her voice carrying the weight of countless generations. The skinwalker was but a symptom, a fragment of a deeper rot. The heart of shadows may have been sealed, but its corruption seeps still, poisoning the land and souls alike. Danny's fingers brushed the pendant at her throat. "What must we do?" The elder raised a hand, and a small flame flickered to life atop the altar, casting dancing shadows. "We must awaken the old powers. Call upon the spirits of balance, those who guard the thresholds between worlds. But be warned, the ritual will demand sacrifices, and not all will return unchanged." Louis stepped forward, determination etched on his face. "We've faced death before. We face it again. For the light." The circle tightened, voices rising in a low, haunting chant, words and languages Danny had never heard but felt vibrating through her very soul. The air thickened, shimmering as if the veil between worlds was thinning. Danny closed her eyes, surrendering to the ancient energy swirling around her. The war was no longer just a battle of light against dark, it was a reckoning. And she was ready to pay the price. The chant grew louder, reverberating off the stone walls and seeping into Danny's bones like icy fire. The air thickened, shimmering with unseen energy as the veil between worlds grew thin, fragile, like a spider's web trembling in a storm. Her vision blurred, the room folding and stretching, twisting into something both ancient and terrifying. Shadows peeled away from the corners, forming into half-seen faces, whispers of spirits caught between life and death. A sharp, cold wind swept through the chamber, extinguishing the flame atop the altar. Darkness flooded the space, heavier and more suffocating than before. From that abyss, a voice emerged, low, guttural, like earth grinding against bone. "You call upon the old powers," it hissed. "But power demands a price. Who will pay the debt?" Danny's heart hammered as the shadows coalesced into a towering figure, neither fully human nor beast, eyes glowing with a cruel, ancient light. The true spirit of the Skinwalker's curse, awakened and furious. Marcus tightened his grip on Danny's arm. "Stand firm. This is the trial." The circle of keepers raised their voices in defiance, weaving light and will into a protective barrier. But the entity pressed closer, the weight of its rage threatening to shatter their fragile shield. Danny met its burning gaze, voice steady despite the terror gripping her. "I will pay the price. For the souls lost. For the light that remains." The spirit snarled, stepping forward to claim its due. And in that moment, Danny realized the battle for balance was just beginning, one that would test every ounce of her courage and challenge the very essence of who she was. The spirit surged forward, a tidal wave of darkness and fury that slammed against the keeper's barrier like a relentless storm. The air crackled with tension, the sacred circle flickering as if it might collapse under the weight of the ancient wrath. Danny felt the shard in her pendant grow unbearably warm, burning against her skin like a brand. Her breath hitched, heart pounding, not with fear, but with resolve. The price was hers to pay. She stepped from the circle's protective glow, drawing the shard free. The room seemed to hold its breath as she raised it high, the light spilling out in brilliant waves that carved through the shadows. The spirit recoiled, its snarling face twisting with rage and disbelief. "Your souls are bound to this darkness," Danny said, voice steady and strong. "But I am the light that will sever those chains." She plunged the shard toward the earth, igniting the symbols carved into the altar in a blaze of radiant energy. The spirit screamed, a sound that shattered the silence like glass breaking, and lunged at her. The world erupted into blinding light and crushing shadow. When the brilliance faded, Danny lay on the cold stone floor, breath shallow but free. Around her, the keepers stirred, their faces etched with awe and exhaustion. The spirit was gone. The curse fractured. But Danny knew the price had marked her deeply. Something inside had changed. She was no longer just the light bearer, but also a vessel of the old powers, bound to the eternal balance between shadow and flame. She rose slowly, meeting the eyes of her companions. "This is our world now," she said quietly, "between light and dark. And we will guard it, no matter the cost." The room settled into an uneasy silence, the weight of Danny's words hanging heavy in the air. Outside, the first fragile rays of dawn seeped through cracks in the stone walls, casting long shadows that danced and flickered like restless spirits. The keepers exchanged glances, each feeling the undeniable shift in the balance, in themselves. Louise broke the silence, voice rough but resolute. "What happens now? If the curse is fractured but not gone, what does that mean for us? For the city?" Danny traced the edge of her pendant thoughtfully, the shard's light faint but steady against her palm. "It means we stay vigilant. The darkness will always look for cracks, for weakness. But now we have something more, a bond with the old powers. It's a responsibility, not a blessing." Marcus nodded, his usual stoic demeanor softened by a rare vulnerability. "We've crossed into a new chapter. One where the lines between light and dark blur. We need to learn, adapt, or be consumed." A distant howl echoed through the city streets, neither fully animal nor human, a reminder that the fight was far from over. Danny squared her shoulders, the fire inside her rekindling stronger than ever. "Then we become the guardians this world needs. We don't just fight shadows, we live with them, understand them. Only then can we protect what's left of the light." As the sun rose higher, bathing the world in gold, Danny stepped outside the sanctuary, ready to face whatever darkness lurked beyond the horizon. Because she had become more than a survivor. She was a sentinel standing between two worlds. And some lights, once ignited, could never be extinguished. Months passed since the ritual, months marked by uneasy peace and a constant hum of watchfulness. The keepers had transformed, their ranks growing as whispers of the ancient battle spread through the city's underbelly. They met in hidden places, sharing knowledge both modern and arcane, preparing for the inevitable storms to come. Danny walked those shadowed streets with a new purpose. The shard's presence in her life was a constant, a pulse syncing with her own heartbeat, a reminder that she was no longer alone in her fight. Her senses had sharpened. She could feel the subtle tremors in the air when the dark stirred, and the shard's glow would flicker like a distant warning. One night, under a slivered moon, Danny found herself drawn to the outskirts of the city, a place where urban sprawl met wild forest, a thin veil between civilization and the unknown. There, the shadows deepened unnaturally, coiling like serpents ready to strike. She knelt beside a weathered stone altar, ancient symbols etched deep into its surface, half buried by moss and time. The air was thick with something old and restless, an echo of the curse that once threatened to swallow everything. Suddenly, a whisper brushed her ear, soft, chilling. "You carry the light, but the shadow watches." Danny's grip tightened on the pendant. Somewhere, deep in the woods, a pair of eyes gleamed, unblinking, patient, and hungry. The battle was never truly over. And Danny, sentinel of light and shadow, was ready to face whatever came next. The whisper lingered, a ghostly caress against Danny's skin, as the shadows around her thickened like ink spreading through water. She rose slowly, every muscle coiled, senses sharpened beyond human limits. The forest seemed to breathe, alive with unseen eyes and ancient secrets. From the darkness, a figure emerged, not quite human, not quite beast. Its skin rippled like cracked bark, eyes glowing amber, teeth bared in a predatory grin. The skinwalker's kin. Danny didn't hesitate. The shard blazed to life, casting sharp, searing light into the twisted form. The creature hissed, recoiling, but its grin only widened, mocking, relentless. "You think the light can save you," it snarled, voice like dry leaves scraping stone. "But we are the night's true children. We are endless." Danny stepped forward, her voice steady, unwavering. "And I am the flame that burns the endless night." The forest ruptured, shadow and light clashing in a violent storm. Branches snapped, earth trembled, and somewhere deep within the darkness, the skinwalker's curse pulsed once more, fierce and unyielding. But Danny stood firm, the shard glowing brighter than ever, a beacon cutting through the suffocating dark. Because she was not just a guardian. She was the reckoning. The battle unfolded in a blur of motion. Claws ripping through air, shards of light cutting through creeping darkness. Danny moved with a grace born of desperation and fierce will, the shard's radiant blaze searing the skinwalker's twisted form again and again. Yet the creature seemed endless, regenerating from shadows like smoke slipping through her fingers. "Your light is strong," it hissed, voice like a serpent's venom, but shadows remember. "We do not die, we consume." Danny's breath came fast, muscles screaming with exhaustion, but she pressed forward, the shard's power surging through her veins like wildfire. She recalled the elders' warnings. The old powers exacted a price, demanded balance, and she knew what she had to do. Closing her eyes, she let the shard's light flood her mind, reaching out not just to fight, but to understand, to embrace the darkness without surrendering to it. A sudden howl ripped through the night, deep and mournful, cutting through the chaos like a blade. The skinwalker faltered, momentarily racked with pain. Opening her eyes, Danny saw movement, ghostly figures emerging from the shadows, spirits of the forest bound by the old rites, drawn by the shard's awakening light. Together, they formed a circle around the creature, their ethereal hands weaving chains of glowing roots and silver light. The skinwalker screamed, struggling, its form unraveling beneath the binding spell. Danny stepped forward, voice ringing clear and fierce. "You belong to the path, a darkness we bury but do not forget. Return to the shadows, and stay there." With a final, shuddering roar, the creature dissolved into a swirl of black mist, sucked back into the earth's depths by the spirit's unyielding grip. Silence fell over the forest, broken only by Danny's ragged breathing and the soft rustle of leaves in the dawn breeze. She lowered the shard, its light dimming to a steady glow. The balance was preserved, for now. But deep inside, Danny knew the fight was eternal. And as long as shadows rose, so too would the flame. The dawn's pale light filtered through the canopy, casting dappled patterns across Danny's face as she stood amidst the quiet forest clearing. The spirits had faded back into the ether, their presence lingering like a faint echo of power restored. The air smelled of damp earth and renewal, but beneath that freshness, Danny could feel the persistent undercurrent of unease, a reminder that this victory, though hard-won, was but a single breath in an endless storm. Her fingers brushed the pendant, now cool and steady against her skin. The shard was more than a weapon. It was a tether to something greater, a beacon that linked her to both light and shadow. A balance she was beginning to understand, but one she would carry for the rest of her life. From the edge of the clearing, a low rustle caught her attention. She tensed, eyes narrowing into the thinning woods. A figure stepped forward, cloaked and cautious, but unmistakably human. "Danny," the figure said, voice rough but familiar. "We've been looking for you. The keepers need you. There's something else coming." Danny's gaze hardened. She'd hoped for peace, even for a moment. But some darkness never truly dies. It only waits for its chance to rise again. She nodded, resolve settling like armor around her heart. "Then we don't wait," she said quietly. "We hunt it down first." Together, they vanished into the forest's shadows, hunters bound by light and darkness, guardians of a fragile world caught forever between night and day. The forest seemed to close around them like a living maze as Danny and the cloaked figure moved swiftly through the underbrush. The air grew heavier with each step, thickening with an unnatural chill that seeped into Danny's bones. The pendant at her throat pulsed faintly, a rhythmic heartbeat syncing with her own, warning her of the growing danger. "We've been tracking strange disturbances," the figure said, voice low and urgent. "Animals disappearing, strange sounds at night, shadows moving against the wind. It's unlike anything we've seen before." Danny's eyes narrowed. "The skinwalker's kin?" "Not exactly," the figure replied, glancing over a shoulder. "Something older. More cunning. It's adapting." A sudden snap of a twig shattered the tense silence. Both froze, senses straining toward the darkness. From the shadows emerged a creature, slim, elongated limbs ending in claws that scraped the ground, eyes gleaming with malevolent intelligence. Its mouth curled into a smile too wide for any human face. Danny drew the shard, its light flaring to life and casting the creature in stark relief. It hissed, retreating but watching, calculating. "This is no ordinary shadow," Danny murmured. "It's testing us." The creature's laughter echoed, a haunting, discordant sound that seemed to ripple through the trees. "We'll be ready," Danny said, tightening her grip on the shard. "Because as long as it hunts, so will we." And with that, the forest swallowed them once more. A battlefield where light and shadow waged an eternal war, and Danny stood unwavering between them. The creature melted back into the shadows with a final, mocking hiss, leaving Danny and her companion standing in the eerie stillness. The forest seemed to hold its breath, as if awaiting the next move in a game it had played since time immemorial. Her companion pulled back the hood, revealing a weathered face etched with years of hardship and knowledge. "Name's Eli," he said. "Keeper of the Western Watch. We've been tracking these anomalies for months, but they've been getting bolder. If what you did before sealed the curse, why is this still happening?" Danny's jaw tightened. The curse was fractured, not destroyed. The skinwalker's spirit splintered, its darkness bleeding into other entities, more elusive, more dangerous. It adapts, evolves. The old stories never told the full truth. Eli nodded grimly. "Then we're running out of time. These aren't just spirits anymore, they're predators." A sudden rustle behind them snapped their attention. From the underbrush, a young woman emerged, breathless and wide-eyed. "Keeper Eli," she called urgently, "we found tracks, fresh ones. Heading toward the old burial grounds." Danny exchanged a glance with Eli. "Then that's where we go." As they moved swiftly through the twisting paths, Danny's mind churned with the weight of what lay ahead. The balance was delicate, the enemy relentless, and the line between light and dark thinner than ever. But in her heart, a fierce truth burned brighter than fear. They would fight. They would endure. Because some shadows, no matter how deep, could never snuff out the light. The path to the old burial grounds wound through dense thickets and gnarled trees whose twisted limbs seemed to claw at the fading twilight. Danny's footsteps were silent, but every crack of a twig, every whisper of the wind set her nerves on edge. The pendant's faint glow pulsed steadily against her chest, a beacon in the encroaching gloom. Ahead, the burial grounds lay cloaked in mist, a scattering of weathered stones jutting from the earth like ancient teeth. The air was thick with a heavy stillness, one that pressed against her lungs and prickled her skin. Eli crouched beside a fresh imprint in the soil, his fingers tracing the pattern. "Not animal tracks," he muttered, voice tight. "These belong to something unnatural. Clawed, but deliberate." A low growl rumbled from the shadows beyond the stones, and Danny instinctively raised the shard, its light flaring to cast long, sharp shadows. From the mist emerged a figure, part man, part beast, its eyes glowing with a malevolent hunger. Its movements were fluid, predatory, as if it was both stalking and playing a cruel game. "You dare trespass," it hissed, voice like cracked ice, "on sacred ground." Danny's grip tightened. "We protect this world from you and those like you." The creature snarled, lunging forward with terrifying speed. But Danny met it head-on, the shard's light slicing through the darkness, the eternal dance of shadow and flame reignited beneath the ancient sky. And this time, there was no turning back. The clash was sudden and fierce, the creature's claws tearing through the air just inches from Danny's face, the shard's brilliant light slicing through shadow as sparks erupted from the collision. She twisted, narrowly avoiding a brutal swipe that would have ripped flesh from bone, and countered with a searing burst of energy that forced the beast backward. Its growl was guttural, filled with frustration in something far older, rage born from centuries of hunger and exile. Danny's breath came fast, muscles burning, but she didn't falter. The pendant blazed like a star against the encroaching darkness, her lifeline and weapon all at once. Around them, the mist churned, as if the very air were alive with the memory of forgotten battles. The creature lunged again, faster, more desperate. This time, Danny caught its arm, the shard cutting into sinew and bone with a white-hot precision. It screamed, a sound torn from nightmares, and stumbled, eyes wild with pain and fury. "You cannot hold this ground," it spat. "The darkness is eternal." Danny met its gaze, steel in her own. "Not while I stand." With a final surge, she drove the shard into the creature's chest. Light exploded outward, a blinding nova that swallowed the beast whole. When the radiance faded, only a smoldering shadow remained, a whispered memory fading into the earth. The mist lifted, the air clearing as dawn's first light spilled across the stones. Danny sank to her knees, exhaustion crashing over her, but relief and determination flared within. The darkness had been pushed back once more. Yet deep inside, she knew this victory was just a breath in the endless war, a war she was born to fight, until the balance was truly restored. As Danny knelt amidst the clearing light, her chest heaving from the battle's toll, the weight of countless silent eyes pressed upon her. The burial grounds, once sacred and untouched, now felt irrevocably changed, as if the land itself bore the scars of their struggle. Eli approached, his face grim but respectful. "You did well," he said quietly, helping her to her feet. "Few could stand against that and live." Danny wiped sweat from her brow, her gaze lingering on the smoldering remnants where the creature had fallen. "It's not just about surviving," she said. "It's about what comes after. The shadows don't just disappear. They wait, they learn." Eli nodded. "And they'll come again. Maybe not alone next time." From the tree line, the young woman who had alerted them stepped forward, her eyes wide with something between fear and awe. "The others are gathering," she said. "More of them, different, stronger. And something new. A force that doesn't just hunt, but plans." Danny's heart clenched. The battle was far from over. But beneath the burden, a fierce light burned brighter. The unyielding flame of a sentinel who had chosen to stand guard between worlds, ready to face whatever darkness dared to rise. "Then we prepare," Danny said, voice steady and unbreakable. "Because the night is long, and the dawn still far away." Together, they turned toward the horizon where the first true light of morning spilled gold over the land, an uncertain promise, but a promise nonetheless. The war for balance had only just begun. The keeper's hidden sanctum buzzed with quiet urgency. Maps and ancient texts were spread across rough-hewn tables, illuminated by flickering lanterns that cast long shadows on the stone walls. Danny stood among them, the shard glowing faintly against her chest, a silent heartbeat syncing with the restless energy filling the room. Eli traced his finger along a map dotted with strange markings. "The disturbances are spreading, north, east, even into the city itself. The creatures are no longer confined to the woods. They're learning to move among us, blending into the shadows of everyday life." The young woman, Asha, sharp-eyed and quick, leaned in. "We found signs of ritual sites. Places where the veil between worlds is thinning. If they're trying to tear it open, the consequences could be catastrophic." Danny's jaw clenched. "We fought them in the dark. But if they open that gate, if the shadows spill free, there won't be a sanctuary left." A heavy silence settled, broken only by the crackle of the fire. Then Danny spoke, her voice steady and resolute. "We need to strike first. Find their leaders, disrupt their plans. If the curse is a wound, we have to stop it from festering." Eli nodded. "Agreed. But this won't be a simple fight. They're organized now, cunning. And they have allies." "Then we gather ours," Danny said, meeting each keeper's gaze. "Light and shadow. Together." Outside, the city's pulse quickened beneath the gathering storm, a war waged not just in forests or burial grounds, but in the heart of humanity itself. And Danny, bearer of the shard, would be the beacon piercing the darkest night. Night settled like a suffocating shroud over the city, the glow of streetlights casting pools of golden haze through the thickening fog. Danny moved through the alleys with practiced silence, the shard's faint pulse guiding her steps as she navigated the labyrinthine streets. Around her, shadows seemed to shift and writhe, watchful, hungry. Eli and Asha flanked her, their eyes sharp, weapons ready. The three of them were a silent force, a fragile line holding back the tide of darkness that threatened to engulf everything. "Intel says their gathering is in an abandoned factory on the east side," Eli whispered, glancing toward the rusted skeleton of the building looming ahead. "A place heavy with old magic, perfect for their rituals." Asha's grip tightened on her blade. "This is where it starts. If we don't stop them now," Danny's gaze hardened, "we won't let it get that far." They slipped inside, the air thick with decay and something darker, an oppressive energy that pressed against their skin like icy fingers. Flickering candles illuminated crude symbols scrawled on walls and scattered bones arranged in twisted patterns. From the shadows, guttural voices murmured, chants that vibrated through the floorboards and into their bones. Figures cloaked in tattered robes moved in a slow, menacing rhythm around a stone altar stained dark with ancient blood. Danny swallowed her fear, stepping forward, shard blazing with fierce light. "This ends tonight." The chanting faltered, heads turning toward the sudden blaze of purity that tore through their darkness. The war had entered the heart of the city, and Danny was ready to fight fire with fire, light with shadow. The chanting broke abruptly, replaced by a cacophony of snarls and shouts as robed figures scattered like rats exposed to flame. Danny's shard cast sharp, blinding rays that cut through the thick gloom, forcing the creatures back against cracked walls and shattered windows. Eli and Asha moved with lethal precision, weapons flashing in the flickering light. Eli's blade sang a deadly rhythm as he engaged one twisted form, while Asha's movements were fluid and sharp, cutting down two others before they could close in. Danny advanced toward the altar, where a tall figure cloaked in shadow raised a gnarled hand, voice booming with ancient power. "You cannot stop the darkness that has taken root. The veil will fall, and all will bow before the true night." The shard pulsed fiercely in Danny's hand, responding to the man's defiance. "Not while I breathe," she shot back, stepping forward. The air rippled, and the shadows twisted, coalescing into a massive, snarling beast that lunged at Danny with unnatural speed. Time seemed to slow as she brought the shard up, its light piercing the creature's heart in a blinding explosion. The beast howled, dissolving into a mist that seeped into the cracks and shadows, refusing to be fully destroyed. The cloaked leader screamed in rage and desperation, but before he could cast another spell, Eli's blade found its mark, and the figure collapsed, lifeless. Silence descended over the ruined factory, broken only by heavy breathing and the distant wail of sirens. Danny stood amidst the wreckage, the shard dimming to a steady glow. The battle was won, but the war was far from over. Some darkness could be cut away, but it always found a way to grow back. And Danny knew this was just the beginning.